There's a fella in our church, Village Church in Walla Walla, Washington College Place. His name is Larry Claridge. He's about 86 years old now. And when I grow up, I want to be like Larry, because Larry is so much like Jesus. Let me just tell you a little bit about Larry. When we first went there, about 9 years ago now, I met him. Immediately, I learned Larry, he doesn't have a lot of things to say, but he sure uses his hands and his arms and his feet to make a difference in the lives of people for Jesus' sake. It's just a wonderful thing to see. I remember him telling me one time, he said, Pastor Lee, I'm getting on. My brother, he passed away now, and I just know this much. He says, I've been making a prayer. I've been lifting up my prayer to the Lord, and this is what I'm praying. When I go, he said, I want to go doing something for Jesus. That's what I want to go doing. So, I'm not going to die at home if I can help it. If the Lord will grant me this one thing, this one request, when I die, it'll be in the middle of doing one more thing for Jesus. I just can't stop wanting to make a difference for him. And Larry, his wife will tell you, he'd hear about a woman who's a single mom, and she's living in a house where the shingles are poor and the roof leaks when the rain comes. And by the way, it does rain in Washington. They sometimes tell you that you can tell when it's summer in Washington because the rain gets warmer then. And Larry Claridge, he went to that house. He's in his 80s, and by himself, he climbed a ladder. He stripped off the shingles. He carried up all of the shingles to do the next, and he did them himself. His wife told me that his joints and his legs are so damaged from the work he's done all his life that he had to lay in bed for 3 days after doing that house before he could even get out of bed and walk again. But that's just his heart. He would rather have been doing that than anything else. And one day he told me this story. One day he was in his car and he was driving, and he saw a man lying on the sidewalk just over by the edge of the road. He thought the man had just fallen and must need some help. So he pulled over in his little truck, and he got out, and he went over to the fella. He said, do you need some help? And then he discovered the man was dead drunk. And the reason he was in the gutter and lying there on the sidewalk was because he couldn't even stand up. He was just so wasted. So Larry felt sorry for him. He thought, well, I can't leave the guy here. And so he managed to help the guy kind of get over, very shakily, over to his truck. And he gets him into the truck. And he says, now, if you just sort of help me out here, I'll take you wherever you live. Well, it turns out that the man was living in a cab-over camper. You know those things they put in the back of a pickup truck? Didn't have a truck for it. It was just sitting in a vacant lot. And he was one step away from being homeless, basically, is what it was. And maybe that's why he was drunk, coming home to that, and no point and no future, and just very depressing and discouraging circumstances. Well, Larry got him into his camper and helped the guy get up onto that bed that goes out over the top there. And then he took out a piece of paper and he said, this is my name, Larry Claridge. Here's my phone number. Anytime I could be of any help to you, don't hesitate to call. And he left. Well, that was just the beginning of phone calls. Larry began getting regular phone calls. They were always at night after he was asleep. He would pick up the phone. It would always be a bartender on the other end. And the bartender would say, is your name Larry? Yes. Well, I have a gentleman here who told me that if I dial this number, you'd come and get him. He's too drunk to even walk out of this building. And Larry would say, I'll be right there. And he'd climb out of bed, 80-year-old Larry, climb out of bed, and he'd get dressed. And 10 or 15 minutes later, he's at the bar in Walla Walla, Adventist ghetto. He's in the bar, grabbing that guy and helping him out to the car. Larry told me there were times when he took that man back to his camper. This went on for weeks and months. And he'd take him back to the camper. He said there were times he'd take him back to that camper, and he was so drunk that Larry was worried that if he left him there unattended, he would vomit in the night, and then he would aspirate on his own vomit and die alone with nobody to care for him. And several times, Larry sat in that camper for the rest of the night, making sure the guy didn't die if he threw up. And one morning, the guy woke up, and Larry's still sitting there. And the guy said to him, why do you keep coming to my rescue? And Larry said, because somebody keeps coming to my rescue, and I'm just trying to pass it forward. The guy says, you need rescue? Larry said, oh, yeah. He goes, well, so who rescues you? Does he live around here? Larry said, yeah. Guy says, what's his name? I'm like, maybe I've met him. Larry says, his name is Jesus. The guy said, I never met him. He said, could you introduce me? I'd like to meet him. Larry said, well, I could, but I'd have to use the Bible to do that because that's where I meet with him every day. The guy says, I've never owned a Bible. I don't know what's inside. Larry said, well, if you'd like to know what's inside, I'd be happy to get you one, and we could go over and I'll show you, I'll introduce you to my friend Jesus there. And the guy said, if he is your friend, I'd like to meet him. And so Larry started going to that camper on a regular basis. And he told me, Pastor Lee, I decided I'm not going to try to give this guy anything that we'd call, core stuff. I'm going to just take him to Jesus. I'm going to open his heart and eyes to Jesus. I'm going to help him learn. We're going to go to the Gospel of John. We're going to go through that together. And one day, the guy says to Larry, this is months have gone on now. He says to Larry, he says, do you go to church somewhere? Larry said, yeah. Where? He said, well, it's called the Village Church, Seventh-day Adventist Church up above Walmart there in College Place. And the guy said, really? He said, could I go with you? Larry said, it'd be an honor to take you. The guy said, what should I wear? Larry said, well, what do you have to wear? He said, well, I don't have much. It's just I have blue jeans, a flannel shirt, a baseball cap, and tennis shoes. Larry said, perfect! Perfect! Well, Village Church is also on Hope Television. And they don't want to look bad on Hope Television, so they don't dress like that at Village Church. Larry said, I'll come pick you up Sabbath morning. Larry came to pick him up. Larry was wearing blue jeans, a flannel shirt, a baseball cap, and tennis shoes. A pillar of the church, Larry Claridge is. The last thing anybody ever expect to see would be him dressed like that. He comes into the sanctuary, that fella, and he sits down on the fourth row, kept his hat on in the sanctuary. Oh, my. And he didn't turn around and say to anybody, just leading this guy to the Lord, cut us some slack. It's all going to be different a little later. No, he sat there week after week, and one day Larry Claridge told me, tears going down his face. He said to me, Pastor Lee, he said, I got to watch that guy become a baptized Seventh-day Adventist Christian. He said, it doesn't get any better than that. Doesn't get any better than that.